Coming home. Qowl. A voice. 1. Desire the Torah. Celebrating Yahowah's teaching. Father and son are returning on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations in the Babel year of 6000 Yah. Do you know their names? Are you prepared to meet them? Do you know when, where, or why this will occur? Will you be there? The author of the first Mizmor Psalm is issuing an invitation to those who want to celebrate with him. In the process, he is revealing insights which are cathartic, transformational, and profound. And he is positioned to do so because the lyricist is the Son of God, a Nabi prophet of the first order, and HaMashiach the Messiah. He is the exemplar of Yisrael individuals who engage and endure with God and of the Berith covenant. While that's a stout beginning to a worthy resume, the opening chorus of his first song reveals that what he has said and done is of benefit to those who disassociate from the rhetoric of the religious, platitudes of the political, and the confounding babble of the conspiratorial. Having done so personally, he not only knew the joy associated with being liberated from these controlling and degrading schemes, he was prepared to lead those answering his invitation to this same fortuitous place. Therefore, the most extraordinary individual in human history is offering to walk with us along the straightforward and correct path that gives meaning to life, albeit with a caveat. There is a prerequisite because his invitation is only for those willing to forego the caustic and disorienting influence of religion, politics, and conspiracy. It is not a coincidence that this same condition serves as the covenant's lone prerequisite. His guided tour away from mankind's most pervasive schemes to enjoying Yahuwah's company is through the Torah. And while Torah means teaching, this is not strictly an academic exercise. Our guide lived it, and to a greater extent than even Moses who contributed to writing it. Realizing that Moses endured 40 years herding cantankerous and contentious Jews through the wilderness because they were too religious to enter the promised land, to claim that Daud the beloved lived the Torah to a greater extent than Moses the one who draws out is a revolutionary notion. But it is true, and he will prove it. And when you discover why, it will change your life. Before we go there, however, a word about that other name, YAHOWAH. He just so happens to be El God. Despite what you may have been told, his name is readily known and easily pronounced just as is his Towrah. When he introduced himself to Moses, he revealed that his name was based upon the verb YAH, which, when spoken in first person, means, I exist. Immediately thereafter, God answered Moses' question regarding his name by saying that he should tell the children of Yisrael that YAHOWAH is my way of being known and recalled forevermore. If you are not yet among those who know his name, who accept it, and who use it, which would include everyone who is religious, then you are not currently part of his Beit covenant family. And, therefore, you are estranged from God. Should that be true for you, then you are going to want to pay especially close attention to what David has to say regarding his invitation to walk with him and benefit from him along the path to Yahuwah. And now a word about our guide. His name is Daud. It means, beloved. He and his father, Yahuwah, will demonstrate beyond any doubt that the author of this Mizmor song deserves every accolade bequeathed to him. These include Ben, El Son of God and HaMashiach the Messiah, in addition to Bakar firstborn and Melech king. Turns out, he is also our Yasha, Savior. This distinction was earned during his second of 3 lives among his people. You, like many, are likely aware of some of what he accomplished as king of Israel. Considering how his legacy is discounted and misappropriated in religious circles, I suspect that there is much that you do not know about why Yahuwah chose Daud, why he anointed him 3 times, beginning at 8 years of age, or why the Ruach spirit enveloped him. Daud's life, lyrics, and loves were tumultuous, cerebral and emotional, brilliant and dim-witted, courageous and cowardly. He was the man. He was every man. He was much more than a man. Daud's return to endure Chag Matzah, which is comprised of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, on behalf of his people in the Babel year of 4000 Yah is boldly and irrefutably proclaimed throughout the Mizmor, YYV1C1, Psalms and Prophets. And yet, fewer than 1 in a million people are aware of his heroic and altruistic second coming. And even then, knowing what he has done for us is less important than realizing why he volunteered to do so and how it was accomplished. Admittedly, the clue Daud has provided with the first word of his initial song is far more subtle than I have been up to this point in this introduction. It is based upon Asheri, a compound of Asher to benefit from the relationship and any me. Asher is among the most expressive words in the Hebrew lexicon. As a verb, noun, name, relational pronoun, particle, and conjunction, it speaks of being blessed and becoming joyous by receiving the benefits of the relationship. This occurs by walking along the correct path to living life to its fullest, ultimately standing safe and free. Therefore, by including the first-person singular pronoun, any I, me, and my, with Asher, Daud is revealing that we can travel along this path together to a more fulfilling and joyous existence while he shares the benefits with those who join him along the way. As we read further into his initial pronouncement, we find ourselves being drawn away from religious rhetoric and political platitudes and then to Yahuwah's Torah. Once there, we are encouraged to ponder its implications day and night. Collectively, that's an amazing opening salvo from the most remarkable of men. Here are the words Daud scribed for our benefit. Joyful with me and blessed by me, Asheri, fortunate in the relationship with me, stepping along the straightforward and correct path which gives meaning to life with me, providing the proper place to stand and live as a benefit, a compound of Asher, to benefit relationally with any, me, is the individual, YSH, as a result of the relationship, Asher, who is elated and favored through the association, taking the proper strides to live a productive and prosperous life, blessed by. The benefits of striding along the correct path, does not walk, lo, halak, he does not journey through life, Qowl perfect, in the counsel of those who are religious and incorrect, ba etzarasha, in the advice of a con man advocating religious schemes through his rhetoric, in the criminal promotion of a revolting authority figure with a plan causing those who believe in it to be unjust, immoral, and condemned as guilty, does not stand, lo, amad. He is not present, does not engage, endure, or remain, Qowl perfect. In the way, YBA Derek, in the path, of those who are misleading, Chada, of those who should be ostracized for leading people astray and causing them to miss the way with their errant platitudes, neither sits or dwells, lo, Yashab, he neither is established or seated, neither inhabits, nor settles down, remaining, Qowl perfect, in the company, Ba Moshab, in the place, congregation, or dwelling, in the seat or position of power of a ruling socio-religious influence, of those who babble. Confounding by scoffing and ridiculing, of those who presumptuously interpret and arrogantly deride, mock, and scorn, causing derision through contempt and jeering, arrogantly mouthing a rebellious interpretation. Mizmor 1:1. Instead and by contrast, KYM, however by contrast, genuinely and honestly, within the Torah teaching and guidance, Ba Torah, with the instruction and direction, of YAHOWAH, an accurate transliteration of the name of Eloah, God guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his Haya, existence and our Shalom, reconciliation, is what is valuable and matters to him, Shefetzu, is his source of meaning, of being pleasing and accepted, such that it is pleasurable and pleasing to him. And in his Torah directions and instructions, YBA Torahu, and upon his guidance and teaching, he meditates, giving serious thought and consideration to the information so as to speak decisively, Haga, he reads and ponders, thinking intently, then decides and roars to remove what does not belong, Qowl imperfect, day and night, Yam Walela. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 1 verse 2. As we ponder the expansive implications of what we have just read, we find ourselves being called into Daud's company, to celebrate with him and benefit from him. While he has done all of the heavy lifting, we can walk alongside, appreciative of the role he has played in fulfilling the micro-EY invitations to meet with God. This is how he is able to bless those who accompany him. I am actually overjoyed that Dowd began his literary love affair celebrating his relationship with YAHOWAH and his Torah using the same word that brought us together 22 years ago as I tried to make sense of a prophecy found within 2 Samuel 7. As we have learned over the intervening time, Asher defines the proper path to the covenant relationship while also expressing its purpose. Those who are blessed by Asher in conjunction with father and son enjoy the benefits of being part of the same family. They are elated for having been favored through this association, having taken the proper strides to live a productive, prosperous, and joy-filled life. Asher is the correct, albeit narrow and restrictive, straightforward path which leads to abundant life. Asher gives every aspect of our existence meaning. Those of us who, like Dowd David, become God's sons and daughters do so by making an Asher-like connection between YAHOWAH and his Torah, literally walking to one directly through the other. In his opening statement our shepherd, Messiah, and King encouraged us to join him in walking away from religious advice, from being misled politically, and from being confused conspiratorially. In Israel today, this requires every Israeli to be distinctly different. To walk alongside Dowd David through the Torah guidance to YAHOWAH, the religious must toss out their Talmud and Zohar, their depressing black outfits and ridiculous kippahs, silence their prayers and refrain from their rituals, disavowing all of their mitzvot and halakha, and come clean. There isn't a single rabbi or any member of the Haredi cult who knows YAHOWAH or who is part of the covenant family. And frankly, almost all are too marinated in religious rhetoric to recognize or accept the truth, even when offered by God. Religious Jews embody the attitudes YAHOWAH finds the most despicable. They claim to represent him and speak for him when they are the most clueless about him. On the other side of the spectrum, progressives in Israel are no less indoctrinated, ignorant, and irrational. The inverse of what they have been led to believe is most often true. Having forfeited the ability to be judgmental through a reasonable evaluation of the evidence, they have squandered any hope of walking alongside Dowd to Shemaim. American Jews in diaspora are similarly lost. 1/3 have denied their ethnicity, preferring to be known by their liberal politics. 1/3 play religious dress-up and live in an intellectual ghetto of their own making. In between, there is hope, albeit fading. For them, it is time to realize that race matters, in that it is a great honor to be a descendant of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, and a tremendous distinction to be related to Moses and Dowd. However, for being Jewish to be beneficial, Judaism must be eliminated from this equation. While those who are prepared to be harvested remain few, so long as those whom YAHOWAH is interested in knowing are willing to listen, our lives will have been well lived. It is for you that we translate and share, shining a light on the path Father and Son have provided to bring you home. If you are not Yahoo Jewish, you are welcome to attend the party and are encouraged to read along as we explore what God revealed in his Torah teaching and through his Nabi prophets. His words will change your life, enlightening, enriching, and liberating your soul as you are brought into the covenant family. Should you want to save the date, Father and Son will arrive in Jerusalem at sunset, 6:22 p.m., October 2, 2033. This is the day of reconciliations. The covenant family will be affirmed and restored. Coming Home is a more recent addition to the series of books first published over 20 years ago. This journey of discovery began with exposing and condemning Islam in Prophet of Doom, rewritten and retitled God Damn Religion, so that Jews might more successfully fight the terror the religion inspires. Next, I would compose Yada Yahowah, an introduction to God, questioning Qowl, now presented as Twistianity, observations, and then Babel, prior to returning to Coming Home, the ultimate conclusion of our work on behalf of Father and Son. As I began translating Yahuwah's testimony from the Dead Sea Scrolls and sharing the insights derived from what he revealed, I considered myself irrelevant, and still do, but God does not. He has a lot to say about this endeavor and how you should respond to what you are reading. That said, every book I have written, 30 thus far, is offered free online and without royalty. So, it will cost you nothing, other than some time, to discover what I've learned about YAHOWAH and Dowd. And whatever time you invest in this journey from man's world to God's will be returned to you with dividends. Jews have been conditioned to labor within the constraints of Jewish law and pay their rabbis. It is a bankrupt equation. What father and son are offering is free for the accepting. Your choice. By way of introduction, I am not a scholar or theologian, nor am I associated with any religious or political institution. And yet, I have devoted 10 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week, over the past 22 years to exploring YAHOWAH's revelations. I enjoy his company and benefit from what I am learning. And I share what I've discovered along the way in anticipation that those whom YAHOWAH is interested in knowing will learn the truth about him, appreciate what he is offering and expects in return, and then respond appropriately. Everything you need to know to accompany the Son to the Father is contained within these pages. And speaking of knowing, it is germane for you to be aware that it is especially meaningful that Hamashiach began his first song with a variation of Asher. As it relates to Yada Yahowah, it was in Shamuel listened to him 2 Samuel 7 verse 11 where, in trying to correctly translate Asher, we were brought to the prophecy introducing David as the son of God and as our returning king. Quite literally, Asher, as the first word I translated, became the impetus for the 5 million words which would follow throughout Yada Yahowah. If not for Asher, Yada Yahowah would not exist. As we commence, you will note that my translations are amplified, providing more pertinent information than you will find elsewhere. Additionally, I make a practice of including a transliteration of the most generic form of the Hebrew words underlying the text so that you can look them up and verify their meaning. In light of what Dowd just revealed, at the beginning of his first Mizmor, how is it possible that there are 4 billion Christians, Muslims, and religious Jews ignoring what he wrote? Dowd opened his prophetic repertoire by firing a broadside that blew right through the faithful's keel, undermining Paul, Aqaba, and Muhammad/Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. They all wrongly claim that the Psalms were inspired by their God. And yet, the Messiah and Son of God shattered everything they have written by saying that we ought not to walk in the counsel of those who are religious and misleading. The very Torah they sought to annul, augment, and abrogate is advocated as the means to avoid the confounding ridicule of the religious by the man closest to God. Paul established Christianity by going to war against the Torah. Aqaba would misinterpret it at the onset of the Talmud. And Muhammad paid lip service to Dowd and the Psalms while contradicting both. As for which of the three has been more caustic to God's people, we may have to wait until their trials when YAHOWAH judges and condemns all 3 men, along with a host of others. Unwilling to listen to the God who created man in his image, these men created gods in their image and thereby failed those who believe them. The first sentence in the first psalm is a punch to the gut of the faithful. First, do not walk in the counsel of someone who is religious and, thus, incorrect. Second, do not stand with a person who is wrong and who leads people astray. Third, do not sit or dwell in the company of an individual who babbles incoherently with their presumptuous interpretations and derisive ridicule. Fourth, after disassociating from such an individual or institution, desire and delight in YAHOWAH's Torah teaching, giving his Torah guidance serious thought and consideration day and night. The man at the center of God's plans centered his life on the Torah. He pondered its implications and weighed its benefits so that his decisions were sound. We should do similarly. These same recommendations serve as the initial conditions of the covenant. We are asked to walk away from man's influence and then come to trust and rely on YAHOWAH's guidance. The beloved's inspired advice is the antithesis of what Rabbi Aqaba, Paul, and Muhammad have promoted. So, we should acknowledge that Dowd began his soliloquy for God's people by telling them what they would have to avoid and disavow to walk with him through the Torah to the Father. Before we draw the obvious conclusion, it should be noted that Etzah, the deliberate counsel, advice, and determined purpose, speaks of a single individual, while those befuddled by him would be many, with Rasha, those who are religious and incorrect, presented in a plural form. Therefore, based upon these 2 words, we are dealing with a con man acting as an authority figure advocating a religious scheme which draws from a pagan past and causes those who believe him to be condemned. Similarly, Derek, the way or path, exposes the methods of one individual while his victims, the Chada, those who are wrong and who have been led astray and have missed the way, would be many. Then reinforcing the realization that this is addressing a particularly misleading and extremely influential individual who is negatively affecting the lives of all of those who allow themselves to be influenced by him, Moshab, the place, company, and assembly that this religious authority hails from, denotes a unique individual while those he causes to, engage in confounding babble and deriding ridicule, are countless. Throughout this statement we are witnessing a single perpetrator with many victims. Since this would be inclusive of all 3 religious founders, Paul, Aqaba, and Muhammad, since they were all wrong, and because they were all arrogant and derisive, there is no reason to choose the most Torah adverse. Avoid them all for the sake of your soul. YAHOWAH chose Dowd to lead his people in the past and has chosen him to re-establish his kingdom in the future, because Dowd was Torah observant. And that made Dowd Tzaddak right. His second advent was his choice, something which will become evident in due time. Regardless of whether you have placed your faith in Paul, Aqaba, or Muhammad, in a conspiracy advocating reptilian overlords and government plots, or in political reformers and humanist philosophers, you have been offered reconciliatory advice. Focus on the enjoyable and thoughtful aspects of YAHOWAH's Torah if you'd like to spend your eternity with YAHOWAH and Dowd. Or you can retain an affinity for Aqaba and continue his diaspora. While it's not recommended, many have chosen to follow the example of a rapist and pedophile, the mass-murdering and demon-possessed terrorist of Islam into hell. Billions also prefer the jaundiced rhetoric of the plague of death. Following Shaul Paul into Sheol hell, they will become personally acquainted with the thorn in his side. The choice is yours. Considering Dowd standing with God, it is hard to explain why so many billions favor the Talmud, New Testament, and Quran over the Torah. Why is it that the majority of people chase after false gods by romping through man's religious rubbish? Why do so many Jews, Christians, and Muslims claim that the Torah was inspired by God and yet ignore it or abrogate it entirely? Dowd didn't, and if you want to be with him, accept his advice. Of the Torah observant, he said. Then, Wah, he is like, Hayakah, he is during that time comparable to, Cal perfect, a tree, ets, planted, shathel, transplanted, rooted, and flourishing, near, al, close to, an idyllic stream of flowing water, pelegmame. The outpouring of the perfect amount of water through a channel cut open to the ideal size to cultivate plants and bring prosperity by way of a marvelous and wonderful supply of the source of life and cleansing, such that as a result of this beneficial relationship, Asher, to reveal the straightforward and correct path to get the most out of life, he produces and bestows, Nathan, he yields and gives, Cal imperfect, his fruit, Purihu, the result of what he produces, his harvest and descendants, in his appointed time, Ba, Ethu, in the right season and proper occasion for him, from Ad, into perpetuity, continuously forevermore. His uplifting branches, Wa Elehu, his secondary extensions which grow up from the trunk of the tree and leaf out, will never wither and he will never lack understanding, Lo, Nabal, will not shrivel up or lose their vitality, will never be played for a fool or be held in contempt, he will never tire or become weary, will never lose heart or be concerned regardless of the circumstances, because he will never be stupid and will always have the capacity to comprehend and understand, Qowl. Imperfect. In everything that he engages in, Qowl Asa, with all he does, acts upon, and carries out, in the totality of his undertakings, considerable efforts, endeavors, and labor, Qowl imperfect, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, Asher, to bless by revealing the proper and straight path to walk to give life meaning, he will succeed and prosper, Salak, he will successfully accomplish the mission, he will be useful and thrive, he will win the argument and be acquitted. Emerging correct and victorious, Hyphal imperfect. Mizmor/lyrics to sing Psalm 1 verse 3. Life is best lived when our souls are rooted in Yahowah's Torah. In this way, we are fruitful and grow. The phrase, as a result of this beneficial relationship and to reveal the straightforward and correct path to get the most out of life, Asher, he produces and bestows, Nathan, his fruit, the result of what he has produced, Purihu, in his appointed time, Ba, Ethu, provides another subtle hint for us to appreciate what Dowd has done. At the appointed time, he fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, enabling Shabuah and Teruah. Soon, he will return to honor the promise of Kippurim, reconciling those who want to camp out with Yahowah during Sukkah. Just as Adam was instructed to work in Eden and Dowd was asked to plant Sion's vineyard, so too we are encouraged to be fruitful and productive, to till the soil so that it is receptive, to pull the weeds that would choke out the desirable vegetation, to prune the vines so that they are healthy and strong. We should always be cognizant of the importance of removing invasive species so that the good vines have unfettered access to the light. It is among Yahowah's favorite metaphors, going right back to the beginning of time with the fruitful and special trees growing in the garden and the 4 streams flowing out of it. Those who make these connections will never lack understanding. Lo, Nabal is wholly consistent with many of our own personal experiences. For example, every time I have ventured forth to convey the word of God, and that would include 10,000 radio interviews, I have never been concerned, much less afraid or rattled, and have never been played for a fool or been held in contempt. I have prevailed with every argument made on behalf of Yahowah, no matter the foe or subject. And there is but one reason, the understanding I've derived from observing the Torah. Its teaching and guidance is the most powerful and compelling force in the universe. Yahowah's Torah enables us to succeed and prosper in everything that actually matters. The most uplifting branch in the tree of lives is Dowd. Those who avail themselves of his life and lyrics are prepared for whatever life brings their way. This is not so, Lo, Ken, it is not true, nor even remotely similar, with those who are incorrect, Harasha, the invalid and unrighteous who are wrong about and opposed to the standard, the wicked and immoral con men and criminals who will be condemned for leading others astray and for misrepresenting God's character, but who rather instead are like, Ky, Imka, the chaff, Hamos, the useless and dried husks, which is driven away, Asher Nadaph who, and which for the benefit of the relationship is refuted, by the spirit, Ruach, the feminine and maternal aspect of Yahowah's nature, by the wind. Mizmor/lyrics to sing Psalm 1 verse 4. Have you ever considered grain, such as wheat, and how tiny the edible seed, or kernel, is compared to the roots, which descend 6 feet, shoots, up to 35 per plant, leaves, averaging 15 per shoot, and husks? And yet, most of the plant withers up and dies, only to rot in the soil or be blown away by the winds. This then provides a frame of reference, at least for Yisrael, on the proportion of harvested souls versus those who have been misled and discarded. And it's 1,000 times worse for the Gowan. As an interesting tidbit, all wheat planted by men have 6 copies of 7 chromosomes, matching the number God assigned to the men who genetically altered them. Also interesting, upon threshing, the chaff breaks up, releasing the fruit. Grain is like wine and olive oil in the sense that the fruit must be crushed to be productive. We have 2 options, both valid, regarding the identity of the Ruach driving the chaff away. Initially, they are misled by the spirit of the adversary. And then, they are blown away by Yahowah's Ruach so that eternity is free of them. Thank God, Dowd is blunt. Yahowah found a man who wasn't afraid to tell the truth, no matter whose feelings were hurt or whose faith was impugned in the process. Those who are wrong about God will not stand during judgment. They will bow down before God and the children of Yisrael. It is only those who, like Dowd and Mose, are Torah observant and affirming, who, as a result, will stand upright, correct, and vindicated before Yahowah. It is poetic justice, those who deemed others less worthy will in the end bow before those they offended. Therefore, Al-Ken, based upon this reasoning, it is true that, those who are incorrect, Harasha, the invalid and unrighteous who are wrong about and opposed to the standard, the wicked and immoral con men and criminals who will be condemned for leading others astray and for misrepresenting God's character, will not stand upright, Lo, Kyum, will not be upright, rise up, be confirmed, or restored, Qowl imperfect, during the judgment, Ba HaMishpat, when justice is administered, during The time disputes are resolved, when good judgment is practiced, nor, Wah, those who are wrong, Chada, those who are culpable and will be condemned for leading people astray and who have missed the way, in the enduring community of witnesses, Ada, in the gathering together of those who always remember the agreement and testify affirmatively regarding it, of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated, tzaddik, righteous, just, right, in accord with the standard, acquitted, and innocent. The phrase YAHOWAH, which was translated as, during the judgment, is interesting because mishpat is a compound of to ponder the implications of shapat, making informed and rational decisions and executing good judgment. It addresses the idea of deciding wisely when dealing with the means to resolve disputes. This, in turn, points us to the micro-EY, which is when vindication is achieved. Although the overwhelming majority of people will not only dismiss what we say on behalf of Yahowah, they will seek to bury the truth, and those who share it, under a barrage of false propositions and slanderous delusions. And yet, there are few things more courageous or compassionate, more liberating or uplifting, than pointing out all that is, chada, misleading and wrong with man's most popular myths, just as there is tremendous satisfaction in knowing what is right and in sharing that which is valid and vindicating. It is not only the right thing to do, when we are approached by that special individual who is open to the truth, who wants to listen and learn, we contribute to Yahowah's family and enrich eternity, for ourselves, for the new covenant member, and for our Heavenly Father. Beyond this, Dowd has answered a question I've long pondered concerning a request I've made of Yah since the moment I came to expose and thus despise Muhammad and then Paul, Vespasian and then Hadrian, Akiba, Constantine, and Theodosius, Pope Pius XII and his Führer, Adolf Hitler. I not only want to be at their trials during this day of judgment, but based upon what I've discovered about them, I'd like to serve as a prosecution witness. And now, after translating these lyrics, I realize I didn't need to ask for permission or make the request because Dowd provided Yahowah's answer in this, the first Mizmor Psalm. Those of us who have engaged in the covenant will not only be there standing with God, as these exceedingly evil people bow down in judgment, we will serve as witnesses. Yahowah and his assemblage of spiritual messengers do not need our help and could expose and condemn these men without our testimony, but it wouldn't be in God's nature. He prefers to work with us and through us, including us in whatever he does. And I for one would like to contribute and hold them all accountable for the countless souls they have led astray and crushed. It is what Yahowah has done throughout his Torah, prophets, and Psalms. It is what Dowd is doing. They have set the example we should strive to emulate. What follows reaffirms something else we have learned: Yahowah knows his children, and other than those bowing in judgment, he has no interest in the rest of humanity. Indeed, because, Yahowah, Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of the name of Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence and our shalom, restoration, knows, Yada, recognizes and acknowledges, is aware of and respects, is familiar with and is concerned about, understands and is very friendly with, Qowl participle, the way, derek, the manner and journey, of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated, tzaddik, righteous, just, right, in accord with the standard, acquitted, and innocent, but, Wah, those whose path is incorrect, derek rasha, those whose way is invalid and opposed to the standard, whose journey leads others astray, will perish, abad, will be blotted out and destroyed, exterminated and annihilated, vanishing and ceasing to exist, squandered and expelled. Mizmor/lyrics to be sung/Psalm 1 verse 6. If you want to be Yada, known by God, be tzaddik, right regarding God. And the only way to do that is to disassociate from those who are rasha, wrong, and haga, meditate upon, giving serious thought and consideration to the information contained in Yahowah's Torah. Today in Israel, in an article published by a Haredi newspaper, the religious were told that if they attend a rally in support of judicial reform that they will be excluded from the house of God. It wasn't because they opposed judicial reform but, instead, because only rabbis are authorized to engage in politics due to their superior learning. They are saying that there will be no expressions of free will tolerated in Judaism because ultra-Orthodox Jews are too stupid to think for themselves. The depravity of religious control boggles the mind. Rabbis will be fortunate if their souls are allowed to perish. If so authorized, I'd send them to Sheol. Speaking of abad perishing, there is a little-known and profoundly important aspect of divine judgment that few appreciate. Most souls abad cease to exist upon a person's mortality. There is no reward and no punishment. The Nepesh soul simply fades into oblivion. It is only by deliberately misleading others regarding Yahowah that a soul earns a one-way ticket to Sheol hell. And here, my friends, is a summation of the first Mizmor. Joyful with me and blessed by me, fortunate in the relationship and stepping along the straightforward path which I have provided to give meaning to life, Asheri, is the individual, YSH, who, as a result of the relationship, Asher, does not walk, lo, halak, in the counsel of those who are religious and incorrect, Ba Etza Rasha, does not stand, lo, Amad, in the way, Wa Ba Derek, of those who are misleading with their errant platitudes, Chada, neither sits nor dwells, lo, Yashab, in the company, Ba Moshab, of those who babble, confounding by scoffing and ridiculing, let's. Mizmor 1:1. Instead and by contrast, I'm, within the Torah teaching and guidance, Ba Torah, of Yahowah, Yahowah, is what is valuable and matters to him, Shefetzu. And in his Torah directions and instructions, Wa Ba Torah who, he meditates, giving serious thought and consideration to the information so as to speak decisively, Haga, day and night, Yam Walela. Mizmor 1:2. Then, Wa, he is like, Hayakah, a tree, ets, planted, Shafel, near, Al, an idyllic stream of flowing water, Peleg Mame, such that as a result of this beneficial relationship, Asher, he produces and bestows, Nathan, his fruit, Puri who, in his appointed time, Ba, Ethu. His uplifting branch, Wa, Elehu, will never wither and he will never lack understanding, lo, Nabal. In everything that he engages in, Qowl, Asa, to show the way to the benefits of the relationship, Asher, he will succeed and prosper, Salak. Mizmor 1:3. This is not true, nor even remotely similar, Ken, with those who are incorrect, with those who will be condemned for leading others astray and for misrepresenting God's character, Harasha, who, rather instead, will be like, in Ka, the chaff which is driven away and refuted, Asher Nadaph who, by the Spirit, Ruach. Mizmor 1:4. Therefore, based upon this reasoning, Ken, those who are incorrect, misled, and misleading, Harasha, will not stand upright, during the judgment, Ba Hamishpat, nor, those who are wrong, Chada, in the enduring community of witnesses, Ba Ada, of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated, Sadik. Mizmor 1:5. Indeed because, Yahowah, knows, Yada, the way, Derek, of those who are upright, correct, and vindicated, Sadik, but, those whose path is incorrect, Derek Rasha, will perish, Abad. Mizmor/lyrics to sing /Psalm 1 verse 6. Those who observe and accept Yahuwah's Torah teaching and guidance are right, blessed with knowledge and understanding, joyful and productive, validated and vindicated, always correct on the issues which matter most, especially those regarding life or death. Those who believe man's mantras, whether they be political or religious, conspiratorial or militaristic, will remain confounded and confused. They will be judged and found to be wrong, exterminated and expelled. Yisrael, there is every reason to conclude that you are smart, with 0.2% of the world's population earning 30% of Nobel Prizes in the sciences. So how is it that you have collectively been on the wrong side of this simple equation for the past 3,000 years? Why is it that when Yahuwah wanted someone to take his testimony seriously and then share it accurately and insightfully with you, he couldn't find a single Yahud willing to step up and had to stoop to working with a Gawi? Yahowah. Sometimes, I am guided to things that, while always available and true, are perfect at the moment. The first word in the first psalm was a noteworthy example. But so is this next sentence, the first of the second Mizmor. Inexplicitly, and frustratingly, there is a greater propensity for people to believe in conspiracies today than there is to be overtly religious or political. The numbers are staggering, with the majority of people worldwide snookered by one hoax or another. For most, the lure of conspiracy is simple: people are looking for someone to blame for their unfulfilling lives. The conspiratorial menace has grown so large and vocal that numerous scientific studies have been conducted to determine what prompts so many people to believe in and promote absurdly ridiculous notions. And what they have found is that there is but a single, common denominator among conspiratorialists. It isn't age, politics, ethnicity, nationality, or religion, but instead, they are all losers. Unwilling to accept responsibility for their unsatisfactory and empty existence, they fault those deemed successful for controlling and inhibiting them. The most enduring and popular conspiracies, indeed the most deadly and delusional, purport that Jews controlled the world to the detriment of everyone else. For example, as I was writing the initial draft of this chapter, a 19-year-old white supremacist and Christian, John Ernest, a member of the Escondido Presbyterian Church outside San Diego, murdered an unarmed elderly Jewish woman. He attempted to kill her rabbi and then annihilate his entire congregation at the Chabad synagogue in Poway, California, at the conclusion of Passover. While this worthless individual is just one among billions of anti-Semites, since his open letter comprises so many of the lies that have been used to falsely slander Jews, it may be helpful to present his parting manifesto, so that we are cognizant of the sickness pervading our world. We will do so after the conclusion of the Mizmor and in a subsequent chapter. While most conspiracy theorists are sufficiently anti-Semitic to endorse even the most obvious hoaxes, such as protocols of the Elders of Zion, they now use social media to promote an ever-growing and ever more ridiculous array of control fantasies. These include the absurd and discredited notion that the government wanted a justification to expand the military-industrial complex, so the elite perpetrated 9/11 and blamed Muslims. The conspiratorialist would have us believe that the government wants to control the population, so the cabal had their evil scientists engineer GMO foods, vaccines, fluoridated water, and chemtrails to poison everyone, including themselves, I suppose. They allege that the empowered, in their zeal to confiscate guns from the citizenry, deployed political actors to stage all of the mass shootings and bombings at schools, nightclubs, marathon races, and concerts. Then they say, because the empowered are different from the rest of us, elitists like Hillary Clinton turned the basement of a Washington-area pizzeria into a child slavery and sex ring. There are even hundreds of millions who believe that the world's leading politicians are actually alien reptilian overlords. There are a surprising number who are convinced the Earth is flat and just 6,000 years old. Many believe that the moon landings were faked and yet believe in UFOs. Others believe that there is a mirror Earth, or Planet X, on the other side of the sun. There are those who deny the very existence of Yisraelites, suggesting that the race is long extinct. These same individuals then weave a web of lies to infer that they are the new Israel in a contemporary reenactment of the conspiracy of replacement theology. There is even a Hebrew roots movement and black Hebrew Israelites where those of sub-Saharan African descent claim to be Yehudim. To hell with Yahuwah's testimony and DNA, they prefer to be beguiled and anti-Semitic. Yahuwah wouldn't waste a moment on these wasted lives if it were not for three issues, all of which involve his people. First, the most prevalent and destructive conspiracy has been and remains, blame the Jews. Paul originated and popularized the religious rendition of this game, and Rome played it diabolically and destructively. The Catholic Church has perpetrated the longest-running, most pervasive, and pathetic version, going so far as to say that Jews, not Romans, killed their God. Of course, Islamic jihadists have committed the deadliest and most insane interpretation of blame the Jews. The Third Reich even managed to accuse Jews of the deplorable conditions imposed on the nation after losing the First World War. They promoted the most sadistic application of this twisted scenario all the way to the final solution. Blame the Jews has been played out in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and Greece with their pogroms. Christianity fostered the menace in Europe, England, and the Americas, and Islam carried the torch throughout Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. It is promoted in academia today in lockstep with the myth of Palestine and a Palestinian people. And now it is rampant on the internet, flourishing worldwide in the artificial realm of social media. Based upon all we have learned, based upon the harm it has caused, based upon the nature of the perpetrators, there is nothing on the planet God despises more than anti-Semitic conspiracies. They lie in the crosshairs of Yahuwah's most basic warning: I will discredit those who harass you. Second, conspiracies comprise the worst form of Babel. Their proponents not only ignore obvious and provable explanations, rejecting that which is valid and verifiable, they commingle all manner of deceptions, suggesting that the truth is found in a concoction of lies. They slander everyone who proves that they are ridiculous while reinforcing their mythology by snickering among themselves. They are universally less receptive to evidence and reason than the most religious or political devotees. By clinging to such ridiculous babble, the conspiratorialists are prohibited from participating in the covenant. And by misleading hundreds, thousands, millions, and billions, they set themselves up to be judged and condemned, sentenced to Sheol. Anything capable of debilitating billions of souls, squandering their opportunity to understand, is worthy of God's righteous indignation. Third, promoting inane interpretations of readily explainable events under the title Truthers has a tendency to repel thoughtful individuals while ensnaring fellow morons. And while idiots are easy to manipulate, the narcissists who stir the conspiracy pot desperately seek the kind of validation continents full of numbskulls cannot provide. So, to give them the credibility needed to attract and hold ever more devotees, they need to mix their lies with enough truth to make the self-proclaimed saviors appear believable. And since nothing has ever been as credible as Yahuwah's words, they are used as a veneer to glue the chaff of conspiracy together such that it will fool enough fools for the foolish to have a following. This is the secret to the success of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism, Scientology, and even Western democracies. It is also found interwoven amongst all of the conspiracies promoted today. This isn't a remote or isolated problem. Conspiracy sites have latched onto my translations, transliterations, and insights, and have claimed them as their own, as if they wrote them. Then, after using them to draw in those actually searching for the meaning of life, they take the unsuspecting into its darkest and most twisted hole. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people have been led to question these translations of Yahuwah's words, even reject them, not on their merits but, instead, based upon their incorporation into social media sites promoting the most absurd conspiracies. Worse, the gaggle of goons on these sites call themselves Covenant, they use Yahuwah's name, and weave insights that are known only through these books, through their texts and threads. And they are rude, abusive, arrogant, delusional, and obnoxious, always picking fights. If there were hundreds of sites and audio programs devoted to accurately translating Yahuwah's words and freely sharing the insights derived from them, this problem would be less catastrophic, but because they are few, and most are errantly related to these translations, the conspiratorialists have enraged the one calling his people home. He is so angry he even predicted their contrarian influence by derogatorily referring to them. Dowd begins with, Wallah's Dereku Bazahu, and so, the devious nut who misleads and perverts in his despicable manner and ways disrespects and belittles him, plundering the people by showing contempt while despising him. Mashal/word pictures /Proverb 14:2, this is followed by, Ba Pet Yul Chodar Yahowah, in the mouth of the foolish simpletons devoid of understanding, the quarrelsome, stubborn, stupid, and shameless there is a haughty and glorified insignificant twig, a sucker, which will arise. Mashal/word pictures /Proverb 14:3. These trolls permeate social media and the internet, infecting tens of millions with their videos, tweets, texts, and posts. These things known, this is Dowd's warning. For what reason, lama, why, toward what end and for what purpose one should ask, do noisy and confused throngs of scheming rebellious Gentiles gather together to conspire in open defiance, ragash gawim, do vociferous and disorderly crowds of restless religious, political, and militant ethnicities and countries estranged from Yisrael rise up vehemently to hastily agitate in fellowship with one another, with races attempting to be noticed and gain attention through their perceived and contrived plots, erupting like an open wound, swirling around and churning things up for the moment, creating a disturbing tumultuous commotion as part of an unrestrained cult of worshippers for a time by hurriedly conceiving and promoting clandestine conspiracies. The people of these nations who are transformed while massing under an antiquated and unifying religious, political, and conspiratorial leader, YAHOWAH, these groups who associate and gather together under an individual who changes them in some way as a result of primitive and arcane concepts, choose to plot and speak, haga, are driven away by their choices and utterances, having wrongly decided after selectively searching, muttering their musings aloud along with their imagined grievances and intrapersonal beliefs, all formed after giving considerable attention to selective information to scheme to remove the people who are the focus of their complaint, Qowl in perfect jussive, continually and literally doing so on their own initiative, in vain, deluded in their fantasies, RYQ. By promoting their unreal claims and worthless myths for absolutely no reason, having drawn their weapons as paid warriors without benefit, without an actual reason or cause while revealing their unfulfilling and empty lives and dissatisfaction with their situation, these uninhibited scoundrels brandish idle plans, puffery and dreams, and attack to their disadvantage. Mizmor/lyrics to sing/Psalm 2 verse 1. This is prophetic of our day when conspiracies, especially those which inappropriately impugn Jews, are so prolific, they are woven into the fabric of the human psyche. When the opposite of what is true becomes widely accepted, we find God asking his creation why they are promoting such stupid notions. What is the end game? What is the purpose? What is to be gained by these, ragash gawim, noisy and confused throngs of unrestrained, scheming, and rebellious Gentiles conspiring together in open defiance such that as a cult they have become wholly unreceptive to the truth? They have become akin to zombies, in that they, like the mindless walking dead, have nothing to live for except to prey on those they have not yet infected. Late in Volume 2 of Observations, we searched out and found the meaning of YAHOWAH, which was deployed perfectly in this context to depict the lives of the conspiratorialists who have been transformed by the antiquated political, religious, and racist propaganda of a conspiratorial leader. It reflects their inclination to group together to reinforce the primitive myths that they are perpetuating. God, himself, refers to conspiracy as rebellion. He acknowledges that conspiracy is comprised of delusional fantasies and are worthless vanity. And yet, this counterproductive enterprise will become so popular, it will affect most Gentiles and their nations. For those who claim to be covenant, while at the same time claiming that conspiracies are true, be aware that according to God they would be wrong on both accounts. Conspiracy is just another religion, another poisonous political perspective. There is no reason whatsoever to believe any of them and an overwhelming reason to refrain from promoting them. It is interesting to note that while YAHOWAH is often used to refer to the conspiratorial plots originating in the hearts and minds of wicked men, those who then give expression to their deceitful conspiracies by lying about them, the word is used in both Yashaya Isaiah 16:7 and Yirmiah Jeremiah 59:1 to express the imagined grievances and interpersonal beliefs associated with the judgment of the modern manifestations of Moab, resulting in the decision to drive them out of the land before exterminating them. Earlier in Yashaya 8:19, YAHOWAH is associated with the conspiratorial musings of those in concert with the adversary. But it also has a positive side, with YAHOWAH using it to encourage his people to ponder the proper response so as to communicate intelligently. Here YAHOWAH is used to say that the proponents of conspiracies are wrong. God is revealing that the conspiratorialists are driven away as a result of their imagined grievances and interpersonal beliefs. He even affirms that anyone seeking to debunk these myths quickly discovers that those prone to believe conspiracies are victims of selective information, meaning that they only consider sources, no matter how dubious, that reinforce their faith. Also telling, YAHOWAH suggests that the actual purpose of their conspiracies is to remove and expel the people who are the focus of their complaint. God is thereby impugning the purpose of the mother of all conspiracies, the protocols of the elders of Zion. Rak, the final word in this prophetic announcement, is used in 2 Mishal Proverbs 12:11 and 28:19 to say, "He who tills his land shall be satisfied with bread, but he who follows the vain is void of understanding and will never be satisfied." Rak is from Ruk, which speaks of being emptied out and unfulfilled, never satisfied, malnourished and impoverished. Rak is also found in Yashaya 29:8 to convey, "It shall come to be as when a hungry man dreams, and behold, he eats, but when awakened his soul is empty and unsatisfied, so shall the multitude of all of the Gentiles and their nations be when they fight against Mount Sion and the signs posted along the way." Modern research into the growth of conspiracies has found this very thing, calling a lack of personal satisfaction with one's life and a sense of living an empty and unfulfilling, even impoverished existence, the lone common denominator among those who believe and advocate conspiracies. It's wonderful when God reveals something in our distant past, this time 3,000 years before scientists would affirm it. But let's be clear, since YAHOWAH has been so with us, with the use of Rak we know that conspiracies are comprised of puffery and dreams, and advocating conspiracies is counterproductive. Without exception, every conspiracy man has invented and popularized is bogus. Once upon a time I had thought that there may have been a few that held some merit, only to learn that the alleged perpetrators were overly credited and that there was no one in charge over the years to perpetuate the plan. I also discovered that making the case for the conception and continuance of clandestine schemes was far too convoluted to warrant the effort. These theories require their advocates to be highly selective in the information they consider while disregarding all evidence to the contrary. And in the end, what does one achieve other than to say that men have a tendency to be conniving and controlling, deceitful and destructive? It's one thing to look into Adam Weishaupt, the order of the Illuminati along with Freemasonry, and his plan to undermine the influence that the Roman Catholic Church held on European governments and conclude that his ideas played a role in the French and American revolutions. But to claim that a small clandestine group by whatever name pulls the levers which control the world and have done so continuously for the past 250 years under the auspices of the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, Freemasonry, the Round Table, Skull and Bones, Protocols of the Elders of Zion, Trilateral Commission, Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderbergers, Bohemian Grove, and the New World Order is ridiculous. The fact is, the mythology responsible for almost all of this is Christianity, and Christian fascination with the arrival of the Antichrist. Little do they know that he's already been here and that he is responsible for Luke, Acts, and 14 other New Testament epistles. Let's consider the underlying text for this peculiar fascination, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Second only to Paul's epistles and the Book of Acts, it is the most notorious, widely distributed, and universally destructive anti-Semitic and conspiratorial text of all time. It was pure babble, plagiarized by Christians in Russia in 1903 out of two well-known books, neither of which even mention Jews. It was initially serialized in the Russian newspaper, Znamya the Banner, then published 2 years later as an appendix to The Great and the Small, The Coming of the Antichrist and the Rule of Satan on Earth, by the Christian author, Sergei Milus. Its purpose was to spread Christian mass hatred of Jews by claiming that it provided actual documentation of the minutes taken to memorialize 24 meetings between Jewish rabbis, recording their secret plans as a race to rule the world by manipulating the economy, controlling the media, subverting the morals of Gentiles, and fostering religious conflict. This commingling and twisting of books detailing European political and religious intrigue was originally thought to be nothing more than a parody conceived by changing the words to a popular song, such that the new lyrics degraded Jews during the time of the vicious anti-Jewish pogroms in the Russian Empire, from which countless Jews died or were exiled. In fact, many of the same anti-Semites responsible for the mass abuse of Jews during the pogroms played a role in the hoax of the protocols to justify their actions. For this reason, Pavel Krushevin, the book's initial publisher, deliberately obscured the origins of the text Sergei Nilus had composed to make the lies appear credible. But nonetheless, he left a wide trail of contradictions, each sufficient to properly assess credit and blame. Just prior to this time, following the partitions of Poland, the Russian Empire inherited the world's largest Jewish population. In the shtetls in which they lived, these Jewish refugees stayed to themselves, governed themselves, and took care of themselves. And while they willingly paid their taxes, acknowledged the authority of the Tsar, and served in the Imperial Russian Army, they had the misfortune of arriving in Russia when the ruling class became more hardline in its reactionary policies, promoting the ideas of Christian orthodoxy, Tsarist autocracy, and Russian nationality. The Jews who attempted to assimilate were regarded with suspicion as infiltrators trying to take over the society, while Jews who remained true to their culture were resented as undesirable aliens. And it was out of this xenophobic anti-immigrant, political, and religious milieu that the protocols were written by those who falsely projected their flawed character on those they despised. Those who actually engaged in racial genocide justified their bloodlust by blaming those they were killing of secretly wanting to be just like them. It is stunning in a way. The Jewish people, who were blamed for trying to control the world, had no country to call their own. They had just been pushed out of Poland only to enter Russia where they were terrorized. In a matter of decades, they would be gassed and incinerated by the millions in concentration camps throughout Poland and Germany. The impoverished were mistreated by those who sought to rule the world politically and religiously, such that their race, Russian or German, Arab or Japanese, Italian or Spanish, would reign supreme. And therein lies the revolting heart of all conspiratorialists. Those who promote them are guilty of the crimes they falsely project on others. That is not to say that Jews were entirely innocent. One Jew in particular went out of his way to harm his people, serving as a modern-day Paul. The idea of an international Jewish conspiracy for world domination was actually minted 60 years earlier by Jacob Brafman, a Russian Jew from Minsk. He claimed to have had a falling out with agents of a local Qowl, the autonomous government of Ashkenazi Jews, even though it had been abolished 20 years earlier. After converting to the Russian Orthodox Church, he authored polemics against the Talmud and the extinct Qowls, falsely claiming that they not only continued to exist but that they met in secret to undermine Christian entrepreneurs such that they could confiscate their property and seize their power. He would write The Local and Universal Jewish Brotherhoods and the Book of the Qowl. While mostly a projection of his new Russian orthodoxy, Brafman's fanciful conspiracy of international Jewish shadow governments was used to justify the pogroms. During this same period, a British subject of Dutch Jewish ethnicity wrote Conquest of the World by the Jews. This troubled soul served in the Ottoman army and converted to Islam. As with both of these men, as was the case with the Russians and Prussians behind the protocols, it was all about scapegoating, about blaming someone other than themselves for our problems. The Russians blamed Jews for losing the Russo-Japanese War and the 1905 revolution, just as Germans blamed Jews for losing the First World War. And then after the Tsarists lost the 1917 Russian Revolution, Jews were once again blamed, with the protocols becoming a political weapon wielded by conservatives the world over against liberals. The Bolshevik communists were falsely depicted as overwhelmingly Jewish, executing the plan presented in the protocols. Paradoxically, the early Russian edition of the protocols specifically acknowledges that they did not come from a Zionist organization, the absolute opposite of what was later claimed of it. Later editions would claim that the document, which was never produced, was stolen from a secret Jewish organization and, yet, a living contradiction, it was written in the first-person plural, as if the plotters were telling their own story in their own words. But even then, the protocols are awash in generalizations and platitudes and completely devoid of specifics, lacking anything a rational person could use to fact-check the story. Following the Russian Revolution of 1917, this purported Jewish conspiracy to dominate the world was brought to the West by anti-Bolshevik/anti-communist Christians and circulated across Europe, the United States, South America, Japan, and of course, the Islamic Middle East. It was immediately popularized in America by the automaker, Henry Ford, who in 1920 published a series of articles based on the protocols in his Detroit newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, and then paid for, printed, and distributed 500,000 copies under the title, The International Jew, the World's Foremost Problem. Not surprisingly, Adolf Hitler and Joseph Goebbels, who claimed that the protocols were factual, were lavish in their praise of Ford. But the paradigm of capitalism did not work alone. It had help slandering Jews in the form of Father Coughlin, the Roman Catholic priest who was the first to use radio to reach a mass audience. He routinely entertained his 30 million listeners with his pro-fascist and anti-Semitic rhetoric and called for the nationalization of all major industries and the end of democracy and capitalism. He also called for the abolition of political parties and elections. He went from being one of FDR's most outspoken advocates, telling a congressional hearing, God is directing President Roosevelt, to being one of his biggest critics over monetary policy, advocating the nationalization of the Federal Reserve. The Roman Catholics' political advocacy organization, Social Justice, published weekly installments of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. A year after Henry Ford's publications in America in 1921, the London Times presented conclusive proof that the Protocols was nothing more than clumsy plagiarism. Alan Dulles, who was in Constantinople developing relationships with the post-Ottoman Turks, actually reported the source from which it was plagiarized to the Times, and would later, without success, lobby the U.S. State Department to publicly denounce the forgery. They confirmed that it had been copied indirectly from a French political satire that never even mentioned Jews, Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu, written by Maurice Joly, a French attorney, in 1868. That in itself is interesting because Machiavelli wrote The Prince to increase the political and religious authority of the Roman Catholic Church and to concentrate absolute power under a single individual, the Pope. He encouraged popes to be ruthless tyrants, totally merciless because the fear of terrorist tactics would cause people to submit to their authority and, according to Machiavelli, the end result justifies the means used to achieve it. The sole intent of the prince was to establish Roman Catholic domination over the earth, not Jewish influence. Further, Montesquieu's position was just the opposite. He was a French philosopher who popularized the idea of separating governmental authority so that it was not concentrated under a single individual. The United States Constitution was influenced by his philosophy, as it gave rise to the shared powers of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. Therefore, the fictional religious and political satire from which the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was plagiarized, was actually written in protest of the regime of Louis Napoleon Bonaparte who ruled France from 1848 through 1870. The ghost of Montesquieu made the case for freedom while the ghost of Machiavelli opined for despotism. The spirit of Machiavelli would claim he wouldn't even need 20 years to utterly transform the most indomitable European character and render it as docile under tyranny as the debased people of Asia, addressing the Islamic kingdoms of the Middle East. But Montesquieu insisted that the people's desire for freedom was invincible. Over the course of 25 dialogues, step by step, Machiavelli, who in Joly's plot covertly represented Napoleon, explains how he would replace freedom with despotism in any given European country. He states, absolute power will no longer be an accident of fortune but will become a need of the modern society. Recognizing that Machiavelli would prevail on behalf of a unified and draconian church and state, with the Roman Catholic Church dominating the world, the secular Montesquieu laments in the end, Eternal God, what have you permitted? Joly, for having exposed the menace of church and state, was arrested and jailed for 18 months in the Saint-Pélagie prison in Paris and his book was banned. The Protocols 1-19 closely follow the order of Maurice Joly's dialogues 1-17, with identifiable phrases from Joly peppering the anti-Semitic farce. And as an interesting aside, Joly, a monarchist and legitimist, a proponent of royalty and dynastic succession, actually plagiarized much of his dialogue in Hell from a novel by Eugene Sue, Les Mystères du Peuple. The initial transformation into an anti-Semitic text was accomplished in the Prussian novel by Hermann Goethe, called Biarritz to Sedan, which was published in 1868. Goethe, an anti-Semitic postal worker, was an agent provocateur for the Prussian secret police. In 1849 he had been convicted of forging letters which were used as evidence to frame democratic leaders. Losing his job at the post office, Goethe began working as a conservative columnist for the Neuen Probischen Zeitung newspaper along with notables such as Otto von Bismarck, soon thereafter traveling to Turkey before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. His leisure time was consumed writing romance novels with a political bent under the pen name Sir John Ratcliffe, typically attacking either Jews or the British government. Then in 1868, Goethe plagiarized and bastardized dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu. By replacing Machiavelli's Roman Catholic conspiratorial despot debating a secular libertarian with the fictional Elders of Zion. Beyond substituting names, he added the chapter. At the Jewish cemetery in Prague, wherein a secret rabbinical cabal, the Council of Representatives of the 12 tribes of Israel, unaware of the fact that all but 2 of the 12 tribes remained lost after the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom, conducted one of their centennial meetings at midnight in the cemetery in which the devil was said to have played a starring role. This work of complete fiction alleges to report on the progress of the long-term rabbinical conspiracy to establish world domination. In addition to the Machiavellian schemes, Goethe added acquisition of property, transforming craftsmen into industrial workers, infiltration into high public offices, and control of the press, such that, according to Chairman Levitt, fellow rabbis would become kings of the world in 100 years. The fictional rabbinical speech was frequently quoted as if it were an authentic episode and cited as proof of the authenticity of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. But even here, like Satan himself, Goethe borrowed heavily from a scene in the French portrayal of the life of Count Alessandro Cagliostro, whose alias, Giuseppe Balsamo, became the title of the book by Alexander Dumas. This rather infamous Italian, who died in 1795, was an occultist, psychic, alchemist, healer, and magician. Count Alessandro Cagliostro, aka Giuseppe Balsamo, became one of several central players in the days leading to the French Revolution as a result of his role in the plot of the affair of the diamond necklace, which is why the book about his life was written, and from which the most famous chapter of the Protocols was pilfered. Goethe at the Jewish cemetery. In Prague appeared in St. Petersburg in pamphlet format. It was purported to be non-fiction and celebrated as truly and frighteningly accurate. That conspiracy was so intriguing and well-known, it is a wonder anyone believed the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Count Alessandro Cagliostro was one of 4 con artists tried by the Paris Parliament over the necklace. And while it's likely that the man who claimed to have been abandoned after being born to Christians of nobility, and who traveled to Medina, Mecca, and Cairo prior to being admitted into the Roman Catholic Sovereign Military Order of Malta, played only a minor role in the affair, the story chronicled in the book Christians plagiarized to create the concluding chapter of the Protocols, demonstrates the lure of conspiracy. The diamond necklace about which this whole affair began was offered to Queen Marie Antoinette, the wife of King Louis XVI of France. She turned it down, saying, "We have more need of 70 ships than of necklaces." But the truth did not stand in the way of the fictional tale promoted by the Jacobins to discredit the queen. While it was not true, pamphlets flooded France, attesting to the notion that Antoinette had attempted to defraud the crown jewelers, all of which was used to justify her beheading in the French Revolution. In reality, because the crown jewelers couldn't get the queen to buy their necklace, they elicited the help of trickster Jean de Saint-Remy Valois, who conceived the plan to use the necklace to gain royal patronage and, thus, wealth and power in Roman Catholic France. After becoming the mistress of Cardinal de Rohan, whom Marie Antoinette despised for being a rumor-monger who spread lies about her to the Holy Roman Empress Maria Theresa, Jean de Saint-Remy played the cardinal who became convinced as a result of letters that she forged, that Marie Antoinette was secretly in love with him. Then to fool the cardinal into believing that she and the queen were close, Saint-Remy Valois, in August of 1784 arranged for Cardinal de Rohan to meet the queen in the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. But unbeknownst to Rohan, rather than being greeted by Antoinette, Saint Remy arranged for the cardinal to meet with a prostitute, Nicole d'Oliva, who was chosen for the role because of her resemblance to Antoinette. After Jeanne de Saint Remy entered the French royal court through another lover, Rateau de Villette, she continued to manipulate Cardinal Rohan. He transferred large sums of money to her under the guise of supporting the Queen's charity work, while she perpetuated the myth of her close ties with Antoinette. She became so brazen with her forgeries, many, including the jewelers Bamer and Bassenge, embraced her deceptions as real, resolving to use her to sell their necklace, offering her a commission. A talented con artist and forger, the French trickster, Jeanne de Saint Remy Valois, pretending to be Queen Marie Antoinette, sent several letters to Cardinal de Rohan which included an order to buy the necklace, even signing each letter, Marie Antoinette de France. But since there was starvation and poverty in France, Saint Remy asked the cardinal to act as a secret intermediary. So, he negotiated a price to be paid in installments, claiming to have the Queen's authorization, showing the jewelers the documents Jeanne de Saint Remy Valois had forged for the occasion. After bringing the necklace home, Saint Remy arranged for a valet to fetch it and promptly picked the necklace apart and sold the gems on the black markets of Paris and London. Then when Bamer complained to the Queen about not receiving any future installments, Antoinette correctly stated that she had not ordered or received the necklace. Immediately thereafter, on the Assumption of Mary, August 15, 1785, as Cardinal de Rohan prepared to officiate in the royal chapel, he was summoned before the King and Queen to explain himself. Evidently prepared, he presented the forged letter signed, Marie Antoinette de France, not knowing that French royalty signed only with their given names. King Louis, recognizing that Cardinal de Rohan, having spent his life in and around the palace should have known this, arrested the cardinal and sent him to the Bastille. On the way, he sent a note to Jeanne de Saint Remy Valois, telling her to destroy all copies of the fraudulent operation. At the same time, the police also arrested the prostitute, Nicole d'Oliva, who confessed, while indicting the noted Freemason and occultist, Alessandro Cagliostro, the man whose biography became the basis of the most notorious chapter of the Protocols. Politically connected, Cardinal de Rohan and Alessandro Cagliostro chose to be judged by the Parlement de Paris rather than the king. And while they were acquitted for political and religious reasons, the affair of the diamond necklace was now news the world over and the stuff of conspiracy. Meanwhile, Jeanne de Saint Remy Valois was condemned to whipping and branded with a V for Volius/thief on each shoulder. She was sentenced to life imprisonment in the prostitutes' prison at the Salpêtrière, from which she escaped dressed as a boy. But that is not the end of the story. As conspiracies are wont to do, even with the French government and Marie Antoinette both being innocent, and the Roman Catholic cardinal complicit, the people preferred the scandalous and seductive deceptions and blamed the Queen, believing that she was a manipulative spendthrift and more interested in vanity than the welfare of the people. As for Jeanne de Saint Remy Valois, she took refuge in London and in 1789 published her memoirs Justificatives, once again libeling Queen Marie Antoinette. The conspiracy of the diamond necklace affair opened the floodgates of malicious attacks on the crown, especially the Queen, all deliberately orchestrated to bring down the monarchy. Salacious and degrading pamphlets, yesteryear's social media, kindled the fires that led to the French Revolution with wholly fabricated, albeit lurid, tales contrived to fashion the perfect scapegoat for the Jacobins to deploy. It was akin to the most famous line attributed to the French monarchy, "Tu ils mangent de la brioche, let them eat cake," which in ancient literature was supposedly spoken by a great princess upon learning that the peasants had no bread. And while the phrase is commonly attributed to Queen Marie Antoinette to discredit her, there is no record of her having said it. It was yet another lie at the heart of a conspiracy, not a word of which was true. A work of Babel, a complete fabrication lifted from books having everything to do with European politics and Roman Catholicism and nothing whatsoever to do with Jews, was presented in newspapers as if they were reporting the news. The worst part of the protocols is that it allowed anti-Semites to spread their hatred of Jews worldwide. And it became a blueprint for one absurd conspiracy after another. Even when it wasn't true, Jews are now seen as controlling every significant human endeavor. Today, the most commonly read rendition of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion was anonymously augmented in 1934 to include articles from Ford's Dearborn Independent, thereby expanding the original in Nilou's 1905 book The Great and the Small, The Coming of the Antichrist and the Rule of Satan on Earth. The 1934 text, still purporting to be a transcription of minutes stolen from the 18th century rabbinical cabal, includes a 1920 citation from Chaim Weizmann whereby he simply states that Jews are dispersed all over the world. Rather than prove that the alleged document purporting to have been written 2 centuries earlier was a complete hoax, the conspirators used the innocuous Weizmann citation as evidence that a national home in Palestine is only camouflage and an infinitesimal part of the Jews' real object. The Jews of the world have no intention of settling in Palestine or any separate country, and that Jews are now a world menace for which the Aryan races will have to domicile them permanently out of Europe. And the fact remains that conspiracies are credibility quicksand. And that is yet another reason that Yahowah doesn't want his people venturing into them. He doesn't want his message contaminated by them. After all, God has already endured millennia of having his veracity impugned by all the religions which claim to speak for him. The last thing he wants is to endure yet another blow from the dumbest among us. Yahowah recognizes that anyone who dares step into the murky realm of clandestine schemes gets filthy and is stained by the experience, even if they manage to escape. And no one gets out unscathed. It's a muddy and murky world with few facts and tenuous speculations. It is not a place for those who wish to be known based upon evidence and reason. We have just begun. Let's turn the page and see where this all leads. Yada Yahowah.